Hello, everyone, and welcome to this third seminar of the Axiom Programming School. As always, I would like to start with a little briefing, a little information about myself, the school, and the seminar, even though I see that everyone here has already been to the previous seminars. Still, it would be good for people who will be watching it online on YouTube. So my name is Anatoly. I have been working in the software industry for the past 9 years. And currently I'm working on the Scala programming language together with its core team at Swiss Polytechnic University. This school, the Axiom Programming School, it is a programming school that I created that is aiming at absolute beginners in programming, so people without any prior exposure to programming. And at this school, we are focusing primarily on programming concepts. And those concepts, they are supposed to be similar in the majority of programming languages. So if you know those concepts, it should be fairly easy to pick up any language of your liking in the future. We are going to be studying programming with the help of the Scala programming language, since in my view, it's a language that is very rich in concepts, so we can cover a lot of concepts that can be applied to other programming languages. So a little bit about this seminar, the workflow of this seminar. So the agenda will be as follows. So for up to 40 minutes, around 40 minutes, we will spend covering one of the chapters of the book that I published on Discord, and then we will have some time for questions and answers. During the seminar, the main mode of interaction between me and you guys is chat. So so there will be time when I ask you some questions to solve some challenge or something like that. So you can provide responses to such questions through chat. Otherwise, if you want to say something, you can raise your hand. If I ask a question that needs you to speak, you can raise your hand and then I'll unmute your microphone and you can speak. So that's a little briefing about the seminar, a little intro. If there are no questions about this, then I think we can proceed to the topic of today's seminar, which will be methods. So before we go to this topic, it is good to do a little recap of what we have learned so far in the previous 3 seminars. So maybe let's take a little bit of time to do that. So I'll share my whiteboard. So can everyone see the whiteboard? Please write in the chat if you can see it. Okay, great. So far we have covered several main concepts. So first main concept that this entire course is based on is the concept of logic and data. And this is a worldview of programming that says that everything in programming can be viewed as either logic or data. So any software you might take, any software that you use in everyday life, be it your browsers that you use to browse the internet, be it the social network, be it messengers that you use to talk to people, all of it can be represented via data and logic. And data is passive information that the computer manipulates with. And logic is the actions on this information. So for instance, a data can be a message that you want to send on Facebook to another person, and logic is an act of actually sending that message. So that's one of the concepts that we covered. Another thing that we covered immediately after is how to actually write the Scala code. So the Scala code is written in a software called Scasti, And if you open any chapter of the book, you see at the top of the page, there are links. And one of those links is write code. So if you click that link, then Scasti will open. And Scasti is an editor that we are using to write the Scala code. So you can write, for instance, print line hello, and at the bottom of the screen, you will get the result. And finally, as a final piece of information that we covered and that we are going to build upon in today's seminar is the concept of a variable and the concept of how to use Scala as a glorified calculator. So we have learned that you can not only print some arbitrary text on screen, but you can also do mathematics like 2 plus 3, for example. It will tell you how much it will be. You can do some more complex mathematical expressions, like for instance, 28 times 32 plus 10. It will tell you how much it is going to be. And in the previous seminar, we have used this information for the purpose of calculating the cost of vacation. So maybe I'll copy and paste the code that we had in the previous chapter. So in the previous chapter, we were having a hypothetical scenario where we are going for a vacation, and we want to calculate the price that we will pay for that vacation. And the vacation is to Barcelona from Helsinki. So what we need to take into account is the flight costs, which is $200 in our case. Then there are costs to live in the hotel. Then there are costs for meals, which are daily costs, so they change, so they are constant for every single day, but the longer you stay, the more you pay. And then we have the duration of the stay for that particular vacation. So then we can have all those variables, all those costs defined as variables, and we can put them in a single mathematical expression to calculate the total vacation cost. So that was everything that we have covered so far. And in this seminar, we are going to extend the thing a little bit further. So we are going to ask ourselves, okay, what if we have several cities to visit? Because so far we have visited only, we had only vacation in Barcelona. So what if we have also after Barcelona, we go to Rome, for example, and we want to calculate the total cost for the vacation in Rome as well. So does anyone in chat have any idea how we should proceed about calculating that with Scala? Can you please write your ideas in chat, or if you want to speak, please raise your hand and I'll give you the mic. So the question is, how do we extend the calculator to, how do we use this calculator in Scala to calculate more than one city? So John writes, you define a method. So far we haven't covered a methods yet. So how would you do that in a natural way using the concepts that we have covered so far? So anyone has any idea? The question was, how do we calculate also the cost for Rome, for the same vacation, but in Rome? Yeah, so John writes in chat, you define another value that calculates for Rome. So, and that's right. So using only the information, only the concepts that we have so far, that's pretty much the only way we can do it. So we will need basically to do the same calculation, but all over again for the other city. And the most effective way to do that would be to copy the existing code and paste it below, and then repurpose it to do the calculation for Rome. So let me do that. And so as you can see, we have copied and pasted all of the calculation that we have done for Barcelona, but now we have ended up with the variables that are referencing explicitly Barcelona, and we need to do something about it, because if we try to run the code as is, well, we cannot have two variables with the same name. And also the values, like the flight for the Rome, is going to have a different cost than the flight for Barcelona. So we need to set the names of those variables to reflect of the actual journeys that we are going to take. So for instance, the flight here will be not from Helsinki to Barcelona, but already from Barcelona to Rome. And for instance, its cost will be $150. Then we have the hotel cost, cost daily, which will be different for Rome. So we'll need to also indicate that this one is for Rome. And let's assume it is $50. The same thing about the cost of life daily. It is going to be for Rome, and it is going to be maybe like 40 or I don't know, $15. And then once we have renamed those variables, we would this should hopefully work. So I run the program and I get an error here, double definition it says. So does anyone in chat have an idea what just happened, what the error is? And can you tell me how to fix that? Or if you want to speak, you can also raise your hand. So John says desired state duration was double. So what do you exactly mean by it was double? John says in chat, you have to define desired state duration Rome, and she's exactly right. So you see there is while desired state duration, which is defined twice. So on line 11, it is defined for Rome, and on line 4, it is defined for Barcelona. And the idea is that we cannot have two variables named the same way in Scala. So we will need to differentiate between the two. So maybe we write desired state duration for Rome. And also John says in chat that the same problem we have with total. So we need to write total for Rome. And also we need to print the total for Rome. And now we run the program and we see 640 calculated for Barcelona and 640 calculated for Rome. Now, is that correct? Does anyone in chat see a mistake that I made? It seems like total for Rome became the same as the total for Barcelona. So can you tell me what mistake did I make? Yeah, so that's right. We have forgotten to use the proper variables that we have defined for Rome in the calculation for Rome. So if you look at the line 12, we see that there is the calculation is defined in terms of variables flight Helsinki to Barcelona, which is for the previous location for Barcelona, and the same with other variables. So desired state duration is also for Barcelona, hotel cost daily and cost of flight daily are also for Barcelona. So we need to change that. So we are going to use flight Barcelona-Rome for the flight, the desired duration for Rome for the duration, and then the hotel cost, the same thing, and the cost of life, the same thing. And if you run it, hopefully it is going to work. So now we have 640 for Barcelona and 410 for Rome. And so it kind of worked, but we have already seen some frictions that we have encountered. So just to show you one more example, why exactly the idea of copying and pasting code is not really a good idea. I'll do one more thing. So when going to a vacation, it is a good idea to have some kind of buffer for expenses. So for instance, for every day of your vacation, you would like to have a buffer of $50. So it's just emergency reserve money that you would like to have, so that if something happens, you have those money. So what you can do is you can introduce emergency buffer per day. So that's the money that you want to have to set aside for every day of your vacation. And let's say it is $50, for example. And now you need to incorporate this into your budget, into your hotel, into your vacation budget. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to, you're going to add them to your daily costs. So you're going to do plus emergency buffer per day. Now, so that works. So the cost of the vacation cost for Barcelona, it went up from 600 something to 800 something, but not for Rome. So can anyone see what did I do wrong for Rome? Please write in the chat if you can see. So that's right. I forgot to include the emergency buffer per day for the calculation for Rome. So I need to do that. And that should hopefully work. Now, what is the moral of the story here? Let's take a step back and see what we have just happened. So first of all, we have a calculation that was happening for one city, and we wanted to redo the same calculation for another city. And then we decided that it is a good idea to just copy paste the code from one city to another city and just change the variables in that code. And in process of doing so, we have encountered a number of problems. So first, we saw that it is possible to forget to use the correct names, to use different names for different variables. So for instance, we forgot to use desired state duration for Rome. We used the desired state duration for Barcelona in the calculation for Rome. Another mistake that we made was that we forgot to use the proper variables in the total calculation. So the total for Rome, at first we were using the variables meant for Barcelona. And final mistake, another mistake that we made was we decided to change our calculation for one city by adding the emergency buffer, but we forgot to change the same calculation for another city. So, and that's just two cities. And programming is all about automation. And if you take something like social networks, for example, they have millions upon millions of user profiles there, and they have dozens of calculations that they run on those user profiles. So the idea is that if you have the same calculation and that you need to do over and over and over again for different things, be it users, be it cities, be it any other entity, then copy and pasting it is a recipe for trouble, because even in two things that you're calculating for, even in two cities, you're making all those mistakes. Imagine what will happen if you have a massive social network like Facebook. It doesn't scale at all. You will quickly lose track of what you're doing, and that will not work. So let us have a look at how to do things a little bit better here. So I'm going to introduce you a concept of first of all, I'm going to introduce the concept of how this is done and then we are going to see the application in the actual programming language. So let's take a look at what we are actually trying to do here. So what we have is a formula for calculating the cost of travel to any given city. And we say that to calculate a vacation cost, what we are going to do is we are going to have first the flight. Then we are going to that flight to add the daily costs. So the daily costs are composed of the hotel plus daily expenses for that city. And then we are going to multiply that by the duration of stay. So this is a formula that we actually want to use for every single city. And what you might notice here is that the data here in this formula, the variables in this formula for flight, for the hotel, for the daily costs, for the duration, they are city independent. So they do not mention any city. And the idea is that to calculate a vacation cost for any given city, what we are going to do is we are going to substitute, instead of those variables, the actual values for given cities. So for instance, the flight can become a flight for Barcelona or flight for Rome, depending on which city we are calculating for. And the same for the hotel and for daily costs and for the duration. So that's the idea of the formula. So if you have any questions about the formulas, about how to abstract things, and how to abstract such kind of calculations, then please write them in chat, or you can raise your hand to ask a question. So if there are no questions so far, we can maybe move on to see how the same idea is realized, the idea of the formula is realized in the programming language of our choice, in Scala. So the idea of this idea is called in Scala a method. So a method is a piece of logic or a calculation that is repeated over and over again for different cities, for different entities, for different profiles, for different data in general, but the data varies. So how to define a method? So first of all, the definition of the method needs to start with us telling Scala that we are about to define a method. And we do that using a keyword. And the keyword to define a method is def. And after that keyword, Scala knows that we are about to define the method. And so we follow the def keyword with the name of the method that we are defining. So in our case, the formula was for calculating the vacation cost, so we can just name it vacation cost. Or maybe I'll just write it in a general way so that it is applicable for any method. So afterwards, after we have defined, after we have told Scala that we are about to define a method and the name of the method that we are defining, what we are going to do next is to tell Scala the calculation that we are going to make into a formula, make into this method. So we need to define the body of this method, which is So now here is the new term abstracted, and abstracted simply means take a calculation and explicitly specify which data varies in this calculation. So we take a calculation for the vacation cost, for example, and we see that the calculation stays the same in that it adds the flight, the hotel, the daily cost, and multiplies those daily costs on by the duration. But we see that those flight, hotel, daily cost, and duration, they are not the same for different cities. So when the data doesn't stay the same, but the calculation stays the same, we say that the data is abstracted away. So the data can change at depending on our data, depending on the task, depending on the city that we are doing the calculation for example. So the body is the specification of the logic, and after we have specified the logic, the third step is to specify the data that is going to be changing. So we do that via so-called parameters. So parameters is the way to tell Scala that, okay, the flight is the piece of the formula that is going to be substituted by the user. So we make it into a method parameter. And the way we specify parameters is in the brackets after the method name. So we have def method name, and then we open the bracket, and then we say all the parameters like flight, like cost, etc., 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 separating them by the comma. So if the Scala sees that the method has a pair of parentheses and between them the variable names, by the way, with the types, we will see that in the actual code. But if the Scala sees that there are some parameters specified between the parentheses after the method name, it knows that those data will change and they will be substituted, they will be supplied by the user. Finally, we see that the logic that we are performing, the formulas that we are doing here, it works towards some result, towards calculation of some result. And the result is the vacation cost. So again, we need to, if we have a formula that calculates something, we need to make sure that Scala understands that the method in fact results in something. So we need to specify the result. And the result in Scala, we will see how it is specified. But basically, it is the last line that is in the method's body. It becomes a method result. And the final step of the method specification is and the application is being the final step of the method definition and usage. Application is when you actually take the formula, the abstract formula, and substitute concrete values for its parameters to calculate for a specific city. So for instance, application of the vacation cost is the act of substitution of the concrete data for Barcelona, for example. So flights Barcelona instead of flights. So application is the act of the substitution of such concrete data instead of those parameters that vary. So we can say that application is so that's how you define and use a method. And before we go to the practical part, do you have any questions about this? You can raise your hand if you want to ask them with your mic, or you can write in chat. So if there are no questions, then we can okay. Mehdi asks what is method? Method. So it's actually written method like this. It's not method, it's method. Maybe my accent is not so good, so sorry. When I say method, I mean this. Yeah, method. So method is an abstract calculation that can be applied to different data. So for instance, vacation cost is a formula that can be applied to many different cities. It's not city specific. And you can substitute values in this formula of concrete cities for it to be for the cost to be calculated for those cities. So method is when the logic stays the same, but the data in that logic varies. Does that answer your question? Okay, so now we can have a look at how you can actually define and use the method in Scala. So let's go back to our worksheet. So the first step of our method definition is to tell Scala that we are about to define a method. But before doing that, it would be good to locate what exactly logic is going to be abstracted away in that method. So when I say abstracted away, it means that logic must stay the same, but the data in this logic will vary depending on the city. So does anyone have any idea of what exactly will go in our method as a formula? You can write in chat the number of lines that you want to put in the method. So for instance, you can write the line 10, 11, 12, or 10 to 12 to say that we need to put in the method lines from 11 to 12. So does anyone have any options, any ideas of what should end in our method? Olga says first line. So why do you think the first line needs to be included? Will be the entire method? Can you please elaborate? So John says in chat that lines 3, 4, 5, 6 are similar to 10, 11, 12, 13, and the line 7 is similar to line 14. So what exactly she points to is those lines that I have selected here. So lines 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and John says that those lines, they are similar to those lines, the calculation for Rome. And that's, in fact, a good measure of how to determine what should go into a method. It's a good thing to do is to see what code is similar to what other code. And if you can see that two pieces of code are similar, then chances are you can write them only once and make sure that the data that goes in them, it can be changed on demand. So in our case, the calculation, those lines that I have selected, the calculation for Barcelona is similar to the calculation for Rome. We just need to change the data on demand, change the flight cost, change the desired state duration, and so on demand. So that's exactly what will constitute our method. The goal is to write this code that is similar to another code only once. So let's start doing that. And if you remember our little algorithm, let me show it to you again. So the algorithm says that we need to start our method definition with def and the method name, where def is the keyword. So let's do that. So we just go one line over the one line above the code that we want to put in the method, and we write def, and then we write the name of the method that we're defining, which will be vacation cost. So that was the first step of the method definition, just to write the def and the name of the method. Before we continue with other steps, Olga says in chat, I mean to def in the first line. So can you please elaborate what exactly you mean? Maybe you want to take the mic, or you can write in chat what exactly you mean. If you want to take the mic, you can raise your hand. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you should be able to reactivate your mic. Yes.
Hello.
Okay, you are not. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. So,
hello. I mean that to define this function, it's possible in the first line to define the method. So it actually could be defined in any line.
Yeah, I mean, it can be defined on any line, but the question was not where to define it, but what to put inside of it. What should
these parameters? First, its name, then no, this to define the function, we just need to write the logic using the parameters. For example, this formula which we use to define the total.
Yep, this one.
We should put it. This formula.
Yeah,
we should
exactly.
Put it as a function, as the method.
Yeah.
That's all, and then we will just substitute for these parameters for these variables. We will substitute the parameters, and that's all.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you, Olga. So as Olga says, the idea is to put the formula that we see on the screen inside of the method. But what we are doing in our little exercise over here is we are trying to see how the code that is duplicated twice can be gradually transformed, rewritten in terms of methods. So we're not going to write the formula right from scratch, but we are going to gradually change this code to be a methodic way. So first we have identified the piece of code that repeats, and then we have written the def vacation cost to start the method definition above this code block. So Mehdi in chat asks why buffer cost is before def. So it can be actually below def as well. It can be actually inside the method, but we'll get to there. Let's first go through our formula and define the method for the stuff that actually varies. So the second step of our algorithm is to determine the logic that is going to go into the method, but we have actually determined it before. We have already determined it because we determined that those 4 or 5 lines that I have just indented, they need to be a part of the method. So why did I just ident them? So I'm saying I ident to indicate that I moved them 2 spaces to the right. So the idea is that moving stuff to the right is how you tell Scala what needs to be included in the method. So by moving this block to the right, we tell Scala that this block is a part of the method body. That's not also. So the following step, according to our formula, is to identify the data that changes for every city to be calculated, which is all of those variables that we have over here. So flight from Helsinki to Barcelona, it changes from city to city. Hotel cost daily, it changes from city to city. Cost of life daily, it changes from city to city. The desired stay duration, it also changes. And by the way, returning to Maddie's question, emergency buffer per day, it doesn't change. Because in our calculation, it is the same for every city. And that's why it was left out from the method. Because it's a constant, it's not a piece of data that changes, and it's not a piece of data that absolutely needs to be in the method. So we can put it in the method, but we do not have to put it in the method because it doesn't change. But those 4 variables, they do change. So we need to specify, we need to tell Scala that they change, because Scala doesn't know that they change. So far, Scala says that they're defined to some concrete values. So this flight is 200, this hotel cost is 80, and we need to tell Scala that they're not constants, they in fact change. So in the formulas that we have seen so far, the algorithm for method definition, the step 3 says how we need to specify the method parameters, which is data that varies, and they're specified in parentheses after the method name. So let's do that. So we are going back to the method name, and then we are going to specify the stuff that changes in this method. So first, it is going to be flight from Helsinki to Barcelona. So we copy it and we put it in between the parentheses. And by the way, since our formula is not specific to any city, it would not be a good idea to name the parameter as to mention the city names, the concrete city names in the name of the parameter. So maybe this Helsinki and Barcelona, it can be removed. Just say flight, like flight cost, for example, or simply flight for brevity. And that's not all. However, for every of such parameter, we need to specify the data type that the parameter has. So what data type should flight have? Can somebody write in chat what data types the flight should have? As a reminder, we have covered integers, strings, we have covered doubles. So John writes in chat int, so that's right. So it is an integer. And Olga also writes int, so that's right. So it is of type integer. And notice how we specify this data type. We specify it by writing a colon after the name of the variable, of the parameter, sorry, and then we write the name of the data type. So this specification of the data type, it is mandatory. You need to write it every time for every parameter of the method. It's not the only parameter that changes though, because we have 3 more parameters. So we need to write all of them using comma separated, using commas. Olga says in chat, all of them are integers. That's exactly right. So let's do the same thing to the hotel cost daily. It must be integer, the cost of daily stay. And it also must be integer. And the desired stay duration is also an integer. John asks in chat, the emergency buffer per day does not need to be parameterized. In our formula, no, because our idea is that for every city we have the same buffer. So the buffer remains the same for each city. But I mean, if you decide that you're going for to different parts of the world with radically different cost of life, and you want to have different buffers for different cities, then you would put this emergency buffer inside the parameterization, inside the parameter list as follows. But if you do not have that, if you want the same buffer for every city, it can be outside the method. So it's constant for every city. So next, once we have abstracted away all the data that varies into parameters, so the technical name of what we have just done is abstraction. We take the data that varies and we put them into parameters. This is called abstraction. So once we have abstracted away all these variables into parameters, we can remove them from here, so that, well, because we are not allowed to define parameter and a variable of the same name, and so we are not going to use anyway. So we are going to remove them. And then what we are going to do next, before this can count as method definition, all of the method definitions, they contain an equals sign after the parameter list. So we write the equals sign after the parameter list, so to finalize the method definition. And the right way to understand it is that there is the method, and it results in whatever is after this equals sign. So methods, they have results. The results is whatever the logic that is running in the method, it computes. And if you look at the formula over here, well, I didn't write it. I didn't write it for the result, but I can write it now. So result is the last line of the method. So whatever is the last line of the method will be the result of that method. And in our case, the last line is not entirely correct, because we have the assignment to the variable here. We have a variable definition, and the variable definition is not data. And the result must be data. The variable definition is not a data. The variable definition is an instruction to the computer to create a new variable. And the data is to the right-hand side of the equals sign. So we need to remove the variable definition, and we need to leave the raw expression that computes the result, that computes some data, and then this data will become the result of this method. And the final thing, so we are already finished with the method definition. What you see here is the method as it is supposed to be defined. So the final step is to see how this formula can be applied. So application is the opposite of abstraction. So if you look at our blackboard, so application is telling Scala what data changes, and abstraction is telling Scala what data changes, and application is the act of substitution of the concrete data in place of the variables, in place of the parameters that change. So let's see how this can be done in Scala. So we have this vacation cost that calculates the vacation cost for a given city. So for the Barcelona, we can use it as follows. So we have the same way as we have the total for Rome here. We have the total for Barcelona here. And then we are going to use the method we are going to call the method. So this is called calling the method. Another way of saying that. So to call the method, to apply the method, we write the method name, and then we write a pair of parentheses. And between those parentheses, we write the data that we are going to substitute in place of those parameters. So in our case, the first will be flight, and flight will have the cost of $300. Then we have what hotel cost daily will be 80. Then there will be cost of flight daily, which will be 30. And then there will be desired stay of duration, which will be 4 days. Emergency buffer per day, we do not need to substitute because it's not one of the parameters. It is a constant. It will be taken from here and put over here. So now we can print this, and we maybe use the string interpolator to have not just raw number, but have it saying something like total for Barcelona. So remember, the string interpolator is a string, and before it we say s to indicate that we are going to use variables in this string. And whenever we are using a variable, we write a $sign before it, so that Scala knows that this is a variable. So yeah, here I forgot to rename the flight Helsinki-Barcelona to actual flight. So I fix this error. So total for Barcelona is 940. Joan asks in chat, is the formula indented too? So assuming the formula is, well, this that I have selected, the calculation, it is indented. And indentation means it is moved to the right by 2 characters, by 2 spaces. And we do that to indicate that it is a part of the method body. So yes, it is going to be indented to include it in the method body. So now we are going to remember that the entire idea of this exercise was not to write the same code twice. And this is the same code that we were trying not to write twice. So the idea is we can now use this method to also calculate the vacation cost for Rome. Now, does anyone in chat have any idea of what I should write? Like maybe I'll erase the total for Rome thing over here. So what should I write after the total for Rome? And yeah, by the way, maybe those ones are also not needed. So does anyone have any idea of what I should write after total for Rome to get it cost calculated via the method? Can you please write that in chat, your ideas? Yeah, so that's right. We need to call the vacation cost method again, the same way we did for Barcelona, but with different variables. So we can copy the variables from the stuff that we have defined. Yep, you are correct. John and Olga, you're correct. So that's exactly what we need to write. And those variables we no longer need because we are providing the values directly in the chat. Sorry, not in the chat, in the method call. So we can call it, we can compute the total for Rome as follows. And maybe we can also provide some nice input. So maybe I will copy the output for Barcelona and we'll have the same output for Rome. Okay, so I have done here the same mistake that I have done previously with copy-pasting the calculation for Rome. I forgot to change the data as I copy-pasted, so I forgot to change Barcelona to Rome. So I have done this mistake on purpose to demonstrate that copy-pasting here is also not a good thing. Now, does anyone have any idea of how I can avoid this copy-pasting? Can anyone write in chat, or can anyone raise their hand to speak? How you think we can avoid copy-pasting this total Barcelona to total Rome? I mean, they're the same calculation, the same logic, but the data differs. So does anyone have any idea of how we can avoid duplicating this logic? John says, type it. Can you please elaborate? So the idea here is that can we type them separately? John asks in chat. So can you still elaborate? What do you mean? As a hint, we have just learned a technique of using methods, and methods are formulas that have logic that stays the same, but the data differs in this logic. Now, print line is also a logic which stays the same for both of those calculations, and the only thing that changes from calculation to calculation is the name of the city and the name of the variable with the total cost. So what can we do with this logic to make sure that it is written only once? So the idea is that we can put this logic inside the method that we have just defined, because we see that every time we compute the vacation cost, we not only do the calculation inside that the method takes care of, but we also report to the user what we have just calculated by providing this total output on screen. So what we can do to avoid this copy pasting, to avoid this repeating logic, or as there was a good thought in chat that line 7 is similar to line 10. So if we see that line 7 is similar to line 10, it means that we can put this logic into a method as follows. So we are going to copy this. We are going to put this into the method as the second line of the method. And now we are going to work on this data between print line, because we have here data that is specific to Barcelona. So we need to make sure that the data that is specific to Barcelona stops being specific to Barcelona and is applicable to any city, because vacation cost is not city specific, it is specific to any city. So first of all, Barcelona, it can be, what is Barcelona? Well, it is the name of the city that we are computing. And it is a data that changes for every city. So it means that we can parameterize it by putting it in the list of the parameters for the method. So we say city name, and the type of this will be a string, because it is a piece of text. And then we are going to use this variable, this new parameter, sorry, in the output to print line. So we're going to say city name. And then we are going to have here not the total for Barcelona, but we need to have this calculation stored in a variable. So variable total. We do not write the city name because we are not computing for any specific city. We are computing a total for any city. So we write total, and here we use the total from the output. And now we can remove this print line and this print line, because every time we call the vacation cost, those two lines are going to be executed by the computer. So first the total is going to be calculated, and then the output is going to be provided to the user. So I'll run it, and I get the missing argument for parameter city name error. And the error I made here is that I forgot to supply the names of the cities to the method call. So this one will be Barcelona, and this one will be Rome. And then when I run it again, we see the output total for Barcelona, total for Rome. Now, this abstraction and applications that we have just seen, it is really fundamental to any programming whatsoever. Every time you're going to be writing more or less serious program, you will be dealing with the computations that repeats for different data, and you will need to abstract away that data. Now, does anyone see a mistake that I made in this code? I mean, it works fine at a glance, but there is a mistake in this code, and it is going to break in a certain scenario. Does anyone see how this code is wrong? as a hint, maybe I'll say that we also want a total cost for the entire vacation calculated. So how do we calculate the entire cost for the total vacation? Any ideas? Okay, John says in chat, total Barcelona plus total Rome. Let's try that. And maybe let's try printing that to the screen. So total vacation cost, and it will be total cost. And let's run that. And even before we have reached the print line statement, even before the program ran at all, Scala starts complaining on something. So it says value plus is not a member of unit, but could be made available, blah, 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 blah. So don't read past the comma. So what is important here is value plus is not a member of unit. So what can that possibly mean? Does anyone have any idea what's going on here? As a hint, what it says here is that Scala thinks that total Barcelona is of type unit, of data type unit. And the unit is, we haven't covered it yet, unit means empty data type, the data that is, well, unit means no data, basically, absence of data. So Scala thinks that total Barcelona and total Rome, they do not have any data in them. They're of empty data type. Why that could possibly happen? Can anyone provide insights in chat? You can have a look at where they come from. Maddie says we have defined it inside the method. So can you please elaborate? What do you mean? We didn't return any values, says Olga. And this is exactly right. So if you look back at our Blackboard, so we said that at the first step of the method definition, we said that we need to say what would be the method's result. And we said that the result of the method is the last line of that method's body. And if you look at the method that we have defined, what is the last line here? Well, it is print line. So print line is a pure logic. It is an action that prints something on the computer screen. It doesn't evaluate any data. It doesn't have any data as a result. So it is a pure logic that just does some output to the screen, and it happens to be at the last line of the vacation cost method. And so the type that the vacation cost will evaluate to will be the empty data type, the unit. So it means that the method is not going to return any data. Now, how should I change the vacation cost so that it does return the total cost that we have just calculated? Can anyone write in chat? Olga says the last line is total, so that's right. Let's try that. So we run it, and now we have the apparently correct result. If 940 plus 610 is going to be 1550. So that's all that I wanted to cover about the methods today, and now we have some time for questions. So does anyone have any questions about the things that we have covered so far? If you want to ask them via the mic, you can raise your hand, or you can write them in chat. And while you're thinking about the questions, I'll start summarizing what we have learned today. Okay, John asks the value total Barcelona and total Rome are outside the vacation cost method. So yes, they're outside the vacation cost method. So why would you expect them to be inside the vacation cost method? I mean, the entire point of the method is to be independent of any concrete data. Method is all about abstraction. And abstraction is the act of taking the concrete data and removing it from the formula. So if the formula is how to calculate vacation cost, if that's the formula that we want to know, it should not include any concrete cities. Because if I ask you for a formula, how do I calculate vacation costs, it would be weird if I get some instructions that are specific to a given city, because you want the formula to be applicable to any city. So since that is the case, since we want the methods to be independent of any given city, we do not include any specific information in the methods. So does that answer your question, or do you want to elaborate? So abstraction, let me go back to the whiteboard. So abstraction is taking some logic and telling Scala what data changes in that logic. So for in our example, the logic that we have is the calculation of the vacation cost for Barcelona, for example. And then we see that there is some data. Well, then we take this calculation for Barcelona, and then we see that the same calculation can be done for Rome, for any other city, but some data in this calculation changes. So the act of taking the calculation for Barcelona, for example, and saying that, okay, we are going to use the very same calculation, but for any city whatsoever. And to do that, we are going to have this and this and this data that is going to be different for every city. So flight, hotel, daily cost, duration, they're all different for every city. So take the logic that we want to use to reuse and tell Scala which data is going to change between the reusals of this logic for different data, for different cities in our case. So that's what abstraction is. And application is the opposite of abstraction. It is taking the formula, which has like some abstract variables in them, and substituting concrete values in them. So another analogy that I can make here is, remember high school physics. So for instance, you know that how to calculate, for instance, the distance traveled in a certain period of time. So distance is speed times time, right? So this is an abstract formula, and it can be applied to cars, to people, to planes moving with constant speed over some period of time. So this is one formula that doesn't have anything specific to any specific life situation. It is abstract. And to apply it to any specific situation, like for instance, we have a concrete car that is moving with a given speed for some time. To do that, we are going to substitute this car's speed into the formula, and the time we're also going to substitute into the formula, and that's application. With methods, it's the same thing. So does that answer your question? Okay, so any other questions that you might have? So another question, the val total has a formula. In order to have a result, you have to call the total in the end. Does it apply to all val in the this formula? So first of all, this like in our terminology, this is not a formula. A formula, it abstracts over certain data. So the entire method is a formula because it is a logic that stays the same, but the data in it, it changes. So formula abstracts over data. Just like the calculation for distance traveled, it abstracts over the speed and the time. The same way, the calculation of the vacation cost, it abstracts over flight, hotel cost daily, cost of life daily, and so on and so forth. The value total, it is just another variable definition in terms of the stuff that is available to it. So in our case, it is flight, desired stay of duration, hotel cost daily. So all of those are pieces of data that go into calculation of another pieces of data. So total is computed in terms of those pieces of data, and total doesn't care where those pieces of data come from. They just exist where total exists at the time the total is computed. On the opposite side, vacation cost, it very much cares where those things come from. Why? Because it explicitly tells where they come from. It explicitly tells that they are parameters to this vacation cost method. So it means they come from the user of the method, the person who calls the method needs to provide them. So in this sense, the total that is defined here is not very much different from the total that is defined in our original use case without methods. Just here, the pieces of data that come into total, they come from variables. And here, the pieces of data that define total, they come from parameters of the method. But in both cases, it is they are data. That's the only thing that is important. Now, your question was we need to mention total at the end of the method for the method to have a result. And the reason we need to do that is because the method's result is always